The system found me 4 minutes after I found his affair texts and told me a stranger had left me $3 million, spend every cent in 10 days, or lose it all. By 11 that morning, I'd bought the insurance company underwriting his mistress's yacht. Marcus still doesn't know why I only needed until lunch. I want to say I hesitated, I didn't, and I think that fact matters more than anything else in this story. Marcus's phone lit up on the pillow between us at 6:52 that morning, and habit alone made me glance at it, the way you glance at a wave out of instinct before you've decided whether to be afraid of it yet. Vivian's name, a small red heart beside it, and underneath, tonight, first light, just us. And under that, smaller, the kind of line you only write to someone you've already decided is the exception to your entire life. I never stopped. I read it twice. I didn't wake him. I got up, made coffee I never drank, and stood at the kitchen window looking at the harbor the way I've looked at it my whole life, waiting to feel something break. Nothing broke, that was the part that scared me. My name is Nora Callahan. Before I was anyone's wife, I was Harbor Fire Rescue, Dive Team Badge 11, 7 years in and 4 more before that as a deckhand nobody paid to notice. I go into the water after the water has already taken something from somebody. That's the whole job description. If you strip away the acronyms, you don't get used to it, you just get fast and you learn a rule, and the rule is the only reason I'm alive to tell you any of this calmly. The rule is, you don't feel it while you're still in the current, you feel it on the dock after, when it's safe to. I learned that rule at 12 years old, the night my father didn't come back from Block Island Sound in a squall that came up faster than the forecast promised. Harbor Patrol got to him 40 minutes after the Mayday, and 40 minutes is a number I have never once let myself round down. I became a diver so that number would belong to somebody else's worst night and not mine. I have spent 13 years making that number smaller for total strangers. It had never once occurred to me, until that morning, to spend anything at all on myself. So I stood at that window with a phone full of proof my marriage was over, and I did the only thing I know how to do with a fact that big. I got still. I got clear. I started counting what I actually had left. What I had, it turned out, included a small brown package that had been sitting on the front step since Tuesday, one I'd assumed was a delivery for the neighbors and kept meaning to walk over. Inside was a plain black earpiece, no branding, and a card in handwriting I didn't recognize. For the ones who go in when everyone else is still deciding whether to wear this. I don't know why I put it on instead of tossing it in the junk drawer where the rest of the world's mysteries go to die. Maybe because my hands needed a job that wasn't shaking. Maybe because 13 years of night calls have taught me that when something arrives out of nowhere at exactly the wrong moment, you don't get to decide later whether it mattered. The voice came on the instant it settled into my ear, flat as a marine forecast. New asset detected. $3 million held in trust. Activation triggered this date. Condition: full disbursement required within 10 days of activation. Non-compliance results in permanent forfeiture. Say that again, I said out loud to an empty kitchen. It repeated itself word for word, patient as a machine that has never once had a bad morning. Spend $3 million in 10 days, I said slowly, or lose all of it. Confirmed, it said the way you'd confirm a coffee order. I have kept my father's marine radio on my nightstand since I was 22, always tuned to the Coast Guard emergency channel, a habit Marcus liked to call morbid at dinner parties. Like grief was a stain I should have gotten out of the carpet by now. I looked at that radio while the system's voice was still settling into my skull, and for the first time all morning I felt something move in my chest that wasn't grief. It felt more like a plan. There is exactly one company in this town I have wanted to burn to the waterline for purely professional reasons, and has nothing to do with my husband, Anchor Point Yacht Assurance. The insurer of choice for every boat owner in Newport who wants a policy and doesn't want an inspector asking real questions. I have pulled 3 people off Anchor Point insured hulls in the last 2 years alone, boats that had passed inspections that, on paper, should have caught exactly what almost killed them. I also happen to know, because Marcus liked to mention it at parties the way other men mention a wine cellar, that Anchor Point carried the policy on a sleek little 62-foot yacht named First Light, registered to a woman named Vivian Hale. I didn't cry once while I made the call, I want that on the record too. By 11 that morning, Anchor Point Yacht Assurance belonged to me. The man who made it happen showed up at my door at noon sharp, in a gray suit that had clearly been put on in a hurry, and a leather folder he held like it weighed more than it did. Sawyer Vane, he said, I handle claims and acquisitions for Kingsley and Vane. I understand you wanted to move quickly on the Anchor Point sale. Kingsley and Vane had funded my dive team's tanks and regulators for 6 straight years, a line on a grant letter I'd signed one thank you card and never thought about again. I hadn't pictured the name having a face, and I definitely hadn't pictured a face that looked like it hadn't slept right since a funeral nobody had told me about. You work fast for a claims guy, I said, stepping back to let him in. Roland Marsh has wanted out of Anchor Point for the better part of a year, he said, setting the folder on my kitchen table, the same table where I'd read the affair text 6 hours earlier. You just gave him a reason to stop pretending otherwise. Fast, all cash, no due diligence delay. Men like Marsh don't say no to that twice. That tracked. It was clean, plausible, the kind of explanation that didn't require me to wonder about anything beyond what he was telling me. For what it's worth, he added, not quite meeting my eyes, I've read your incident reports for 6 years, Mrs. Whitfield. Every grant renewal comes with a case log summary attached. I'm glad to finally shake the hand that goes with the name. Nobody had described my job back to me. It was a resume line worth remembering in longer than I could recall. I signed where he pointed and didn't examine too closely why a claims adjuster's handshake made my chest hurt worse than my husband's phone screen had that morning. You have 9 days, 18 hours left on the disbursement clock, he said, checking his watch instead of my earpiece, which struck me as strange in a way I didn't have room to think about yet. I'd start thinking about the rest of it. You know about the system? I know about the system, he said, careful and even, and something in exactly how smooth that sentence came out should have told me more than it did. I was too busy watching a countdown clock to notice I'd just met the second most important man in this story and mistaken him, completely, for a paperwork errand. I should tell you how I met Marcus, because it matters later, and because I think I owe you the version of this marriage where I wasn't a fool the whole way through. 6 years ago, at the Whitfield family's summer regatta gala, I was working marine safety detail at the edge of the same dock I'd work again years later under circumstances I could not have imagined that night. A drunk guest went into the water off the yacht club's east pier around 10 o'clock, and I had him out and breathing again before most of the party had even noticed the splash. Marcus found me afterward, soaked, unglamorous, coiling a line, and told me it was the first honest thing he'd watched happen at one of his mother's parties in 15 years. I believed him. For 6 years I believed him. Marcus found out about Anchor Point the way Marcus finds out about anything that threatens him. Second-hand in a panic, from someone else's mouth. Vivienne called him screaming that her insurer had changed hands overnight, and he was at my door by 6 that evening with his tie already loosened, the universal Whitfield signal for a man who believes volume is a substitute for being right. Do you have any idea what you've done? He said. Not hello, not are you all right. Not one flicker of guilt crossing a face I used to know every version of. You bought an insurance company. You don't run a business, Nora. You run into burning buildings for a living. Sell it back before you embarrass yourself. I found the texts, Marcus. That landed for exactly 1 second before he recovered, because men like Marcus always recover. This isn't the time to talk about that. It's exactly the time, I said. I just don't feel like talking, I feel like spending money. He looked at me the way you look at someone who's started speaking a language you used to know and let yourself forget. For one long, suspended second, I watched him decide I wasn't worth being afraid of yet. That was his mistake, I let him make it. First Light, I said as he reached the door. Cute name for a boat. Something flickered behind his eyes that I filed away without understanding yet, and I closed the door on him for the first time in 6 years of marriage without saying goodbye. The call came in at 5 in the morning 2 days later, the way calls always come in when you've finally managed 1 real hour of sleep. Cabin cruiser taking on water off Goat Island, 3 aboard, one of them a kid who couldn't swim. Marisol Alvarez hit the water half a second behind me, same as she has for 4 years, black water and diesel sheen and the particular cold that doesn't care what kind of week you've had. The cruiser was already listing hard to port, taking on water fast through a hull seam that should never have opened at idle speed in a flat harbor. I went in through the cabin window because the door had jammed against the tilt, found the boy wedged under a bench seat, panicking, swallowing water every time he tried to scream. You don't reason with a drowning 10-year-old. You just get a hand under his life vest and you don't let go until you're both breathing air instead of harbor. We had all three of them out before the Coast Guard cutter even cleared the breakwater. The kid was shaking, blue-lipped, breathing. His mother wouldn't stop apologizing to us, like almost drowning her son had been rude of her to schedule. Bilge pump failed, Marisol said afterward, toweling off on the dock, nodding at the swamped hull settling lower in the slip. Inspection stickers current though. 6 months old. I checked it myself, water still running off my wetsuit onto the planks. Anchor Point Yacht Assurance, stamped and signed by an inspector I had never once seen in person on any dock in this town, in 13 years of working every dock in this town. You okay? Marisol asked, because she's known me long enough to read the particular stillness that means I am very much not okay, and would like to discuss literally anything else. You've had a look on your face since Tuesday. I bought an insurance company, I said. She blinked at me the way you blink at someone who's just told you they adopted a shark. Okay, new rich person problems. What's the actual thing you're not telling me, Callahan? Marcus is sleeping with someone named Vivienne. Marisol didn't say she was sorry, which is one of 1,000 reasons I love her. She just handed me the rest of her coffee, still warm, good. Now you get to do this properly instead of politely. And went to go hose the mud off her fins, and that was the whole conversation, and it was exactly enough. I ran into Vivienne Hale 3 days after the texts, at the little market on Bellevue that everyone from that world calls quaint while paying $9 for a peach. She looked at me way you look at a stain you're hoping will come out in the wash. I heard you came into some money, she said, light as weather. Newport money doesn't usually come from strangers, sweetheart. It comes from family. But I suppose you wouldn't know how that works. I know some things, I said. It's sweet you still call it a career. Her eyes went to my duffel bag, the neoprene smell that never quite washes out no matter what you do to it. Most of us call that a summer job that never ended. I could have told her, right there over the peaches, that I now owned the company deciding whether her boat was legally allowed on the water at all. I didn't. I have a rule about not spending ammunition before you know exactly what you're aiming at, and 13 years of dive work had taught me a patience Vivienne Hale had never once been required to learn. We had some water damage on the boat last year, she added, apropos of nothing, turning a peach over like it had personally wronged her. Such a nightmare, insurance. You would not believe what it takes to make a claim like that go away quietly. She smiled, bright and easy and entirely unaware she'd just handed me the first loose thread of a rope I would eventually use to pull her whole life down around her. Anyway. Give Marcus my best. I didn't understand yet what I'd just heard. I only understood the way you understand a current shifting under a calm surface, that I would remember it. By day 4, Sawyer Vane and I were sitting on the floor of Anchor Point's back office at 10 at night. Surrounded by 4 years of policy files Roland Marsh apparently hadn't trusted anyone else to digitize, because paper doesn't leave a search history the way a server does. You didn't have to stay this late, I said, cross-legged on cheap carpet, a ledger open across my knees. I didn't have to do a lot of things this week, he said, not looking up, and here we are anyway. The system checked in around midnight, that same unbothered voice settling into my ear. 1 asset acquired. $1,890,000 spent. 6 days, 4 hours remaining. You talk to it like it's a person, Sawyer said, watching my face when the voice cut in. It's the only thing this week that's been honest with me on a schedule, I said, and he almost laughed, and it changed his whole face into something I wasn't ready to notice yet, something younger and less careful than the man who'd shown up at my door with a folder. We found the fabricated claim an hour later, filed 14 months ago, $60,000, storm damage, hull electrical, on a night the National Weather Service had no record of any storm within 200 miles of Narragansett Bay. She told me about this, I said slowly. In the Produce Idol, called it a nightmare like it was weather. Sawyer went quiet, the particular quiet of a man doing math he doesn't like the answer to. If that claim's fabricated, it's not just Marsh's fraud. Somebody on her end had to sign a loss statement swearing to damage that didn't happen. He looked at me, careful, deliberate. We don't go public with this until we have the loss statement itself, not just the payout record. If we move early, their lawyers bury it in 18 months of discovery, and you end up looking like a jealous wife who bought a company out of spite. We need the paper, not just the story. How do you know exactly how their lawyers work? Because I grew up watching my grandfather outweight men exactly like them, he said and didn't elaborate. and I was too tired that night to notice the door he'd just left open a crack. Later, walking me to my truck across a gravel lot lit by one working street lamp, he stopped and said, quiet like it cost him something to say out loud, "For what it's worth. If that call ever comes in, a boat, bad weather, you in the water, I'd want to be the one standing on the dock when you come back up, just so somebody's counting." I didn't have an answer for that. I got in my truck and drove home and didn't sleep, and it wasn't only about Marcus anymore, and some tired, honest part of me already knew it. Constance Whitfield summoned me to the house on day 5 the way she summons everyone, which is to say her assistant called and used the word expected. She met me on the veranda with 2 glasses of iced tea neither of us intended to drink, and the specific smile she reserves for people she considers help. "Marcus tells me you're having some kind of episode," she said. "Buying companies, it's undignified, Nora." "I found out my husband's been sleeping with Vivienne Hale for who knows how long," I said. "I think undignified left the building before I did anything at all." Something crossed her face, there and gone fast enough I almost missed it. Not surprise, familiarity. "Marcus could have married anyone," she said instead, recovering smoothly, sipping tea she visibly hated. "He chose to rescue you out of that little apartment over the bait shop. Don't mistake that for equality, dear. You'll always be the girl who smells like the harbor, no matter how many rooms we let you into." "I don't smell like the harbor," I said. "I smell like saving people your family's favorite insurance company let almost drown." Her hand went still around the glass, just for a second. Long enough that I understood, with the particular clarity I usually reserve for reading currents, that Constance Whitfield had known about Vivienne for a very long time, and that quietly had probably cost somebody a great deal of money that was never really Marcus's alone to spend. I didn't say anything else. I finished tea I didn't want either, out of pure spite, and left her sitting with whatever she'd just realized I'd noticed. Marcus tried a different approach on day 6. He came to the fire station instead of the house, which he had never once done in 6 years of marriage, and stood in the equipment bay in a suit that cost more than most of my colleagues' trucks, radiating the specific menace of a man who has just been told no by his own lawyer, and needs someone smaller to say yes to him instead. "You're humiliating this family," he said low, aware of Marisol pretending very hard to check a regulator 6 feet away. "My mother is beside herself. Do you have any idea what people are saying at the club?" "I genuinely don't care what people are saying at the club, Marcus." "You will," he said, and for the first time all week something in his voice went cold instead of panicked, which was somehow worse. "I've made some calls. About your position here. About whether the department wants this kind of publicity attached to one of its divers." I looked at him a long moment. I thought about my father, dead because a harbor patrol 40 minutes away didn't have the boat or the budget to arrive any faster. I thought about every anchor point sticker I had ever pulled a body away from. "You're threatening my job," I said, "to protect a woman who fakes insurance claims for fun. That's the hill, Marcus. That's really the hill you're choosing?" He didn't have an answer for that. He left without one, and it was the first time all week I watched him leave looking smaller than when he'd arrived. Day 7, Preston Locke, the Whitfield family's attorney, a man whose haircut cost more than my truck payment, called a meeting he framed as a courtesy and ran like a deposition. "Are you aware," he said, sliding a folder across the table, "that the man who facilitated your Anchor Point acquisition is Walter Kingsley's grandson?" I looked at the paper. Sawyer Vane Kingsley, name legally changed at 17 to his mother's maiden name, no public record tying him to the firm's leadership unless you knew precisely where to dig, which meant somebody had spent real money digging. "This isn't a spontaneous act of grief-fueled spite, Mrs. Whitfield," Preston said, gently, the particular gentleness of someone right before they try to ruin you. "This is a hostile acquisition dressed up as a marriage falling apart. The Kingsley family has wanted Anchor Point gone for a decade. You were simply the vehicle they'd been waiting for." I didn't answer him. I called Sawyer from the parking lot instead, and my voice came out flatter than I meant it to. "Is it true?" A long pause on the line. "Which part?" "Kingsley, your name, all of it." "Yes," he said, no hedging, no excuse, and something in me respected that even while the rest of me wanted to put a fist through the truck window. "My grandfather asked me, before he died, to keep an eye on Anchor Point's practices. I've been building a fraud file for 8 months. When you called that morning wanting to buy them out in an afternoon, I didn't manufacture that opportunity, Nora. I just didn't slow you down. You could have told me who you were. I could have, he agreed. I was afraid if I did, you'd only ever see the name and not the 6 years of incident reports I actually respect you for. That wasn't my choice to make for you. I'm sorry. I sat in my truck a long time after I hung up, 10 days suddenly feeling a great deal shorter than it had that morning, and I didn't know yet whether I was angrier at him or at how much I still wanted him standing on that dock. He came to the fire station the next morning, which took more nerve than I expected from a man who was next in line for a shipping and marine insurance empire and had never once, in a week of knowing him, looked nervous about anything. Marisol clocked him from across the equipment bay and found somewhere else to be, with the specific tact of a best friend who knows exactly what's happening and refuses to make it weird. I'm not going to apologize again, Sawyer said, standing just inside the bay doors like he wasn't sure he earned the right to come any further in. I already meant it. I just wanted you to hear the rest of it in person, instead of through a truck window. Go ahead. My grandfather didn't just ask me to watch Anchor Point. He told me about you specifically 4 years ago after he read an incident report with your name on it for the 3rd season in a row. He said, and I'm quoting a dying man, so forgive me if it sounds dramatic. That's the kind of person this business used to exist to protect. Find out who she is before I go. I found out who you were a long time before you ever called me wanting to buy a company by lunch. He exhaled like the rest of it cost him something to say out loud. I didn't come to you as a stranger who got lucky with timing, Nora. I came to you as someone who already knew exactly what he was looking at, and didn't know how to say that without sounding like a liar or a lunatic. I let that sit in the equipment bay a long moment, between the tanks and the coiled line and 13 years of my actual life. You should have led with that, I said finally, instead of the folder. I know. Something that wasn't quite a smile moved across his face. Next time I meet a woman whose husband is cheating on her the same morning a system informs her she's rich, I'll lead with the truth first. There isn't going to be a next time, I said. No, he agreed quiet. There really isn't. And for the first time all week that didn't sound like a countdown clock. It sounded like something closer to a promise. The breaking point came the next afternoon at the marina, in front of people whose opinions I actually valued. Vivienne showed up trailing 2 friends and a photographer from the society page, sunglasses too big for the occasion, ostensibly there to check on the boat, actually there to perform indifference for an audience. She found me hosing down gear with half my dive team watching. Still playing sailor, she said, loud enough to carry across the dock. It must be exhausting, competing with a woman who was never actually threatened. Marisol went still beside me. My captain, 20 feet away, stopped coiling line. You faked an insurance claim, I said, quiet, even done absorbing anything else this week. $60,000, 14 months ago, on a storm that never happened. I have the payout record. I'm still missing the loss statement with your signature on it, but I'll find it, and when I do, it won't be a rumor at the club. It'll be a case number. Her smile didn't move, but her hand did, just slightly, toward the strap of her bag, and I watched real fear cross a face that had spent its whole life certain it would never need to feel any. I didn't raise my voice again after that, and I didn't need to. That night I called what amounted to an emergency meeting of Anchor Point's entire new ownership, which was at that point, exactly 2 people, me and Sawyer. We made one decision. Full fleet safety reinspection, effective immediately, no exceptions, no family rate quietly waived for anyone with a familiar last name. Every policyholder re-verified against actual Coast Guard standards within 72 hours, starting with every boat scheduled to be on the water for the Whitfield Summer Regatta Gala in 2 days' time. That includes First Light, Sawyer said, reading down the list. It should, I said. I'm not doing anything to her boat, I'm finally just doing my job. He looked at me like that was the most dangerous sentence I'd said all week. It was. We both knew exactly what an honest inspection would find on a boat whose owner already shown us, over a bin of peaches, exactly what she was willing to lie about. The morning of the gala, the system checked in one last time, and for the first time all week there was an edge underneath the flatness. $210,000 remaining. 9 hours 40 minutes. Compliance at risk. Legal challenge filed against trust disbursement. Preston Locke had filed an emergency injunction at 8 that morning, alleging undue influence, asking a judge to freeze what remained of the trust before the deadline could complete, timed precisely so that even a failed injunction would put the story of a wife's reckless spending spree in front of the same room I'd be walking into that evening. Sawyer called before I'd finished my coffee. It won't hold. My grandfather built this trust irrevocable specifically because he knew someone exactly like Preston Locke would eventually try this. But dismissing it formally takes hours, and I have to be in that courtroom, which means I can't be at the marina tonight. I wasn't expecting you at the marina tonight anyway, I said. I'm usually a party of one out there. Not this time, he said. I'll get there. Just don't wait on me to start. The gala went exactly the way galas like that always go. Blinding and loud and full of people who have never once had to calculate how fast a boat actually sinks. I worked marine safety detail at the edge of the dock in full gear, the way I had the night I first met Marcus 6 years earlier at this exact event, and I tried hard not to think about how much of my life had circled back to the same 40 feet of planking. Vivienne arrived just after 8, in white, laughing at something, first light lit up and glowing at her private slip like she'd ordered the whole harbor to be beautiful for her one more time. I watched her go aboard and thought about lost statements and swim platforms, and the particular arrogance of a woman who has never once had to check her own bilge pump. I didn't know yet how badly I'd want to be wrong about all of it in about 40 minutes. The fire started on first light a little after 9. Nobody ever agreed afterward on the exact cause, a galley fire, bad wiring, the kind of thing a real inspection catches and a rubber-stamped one never does, but by the time the first scream carried across the water, the boat's stern was already lit orange against the dark, and I was moving before my brain had finished catching up with my legs. Marcus was aboard. I learned that from Vivienne's friend, screaming it into the chaos on the dock, and something in my chest went cold and clear the way it always does the second before I hit the water, because whatever else was true, he was still a person, and I don't get to choose who I save and who I don't. The water was black and thick with smoke haze and drifting debris. For one terrible stretch, maybe 90 seconds that felt like the whole 10 days compressed into a single held breath, I couldn't find either of them. I couldn't hear anything over my own pulse and the roar of a boat burning above me, and I thought, with a clarity that scared me worse than the fire did, that I might come up from this one with nothing at all to show for it. Then my hand hit fabric. Vivienne, unconscious, wedged against the swim platform, her ankle caught in a line that should have been cut and replaced off a boat that had passed inspection on paper years running and never actually once in person. I got the line free with the knife I've carried since my father's funeral, the one thing of his I kept, and I got her to the surface, and Marisol was already there in the water to haul her the rest of the way while I went back down for him. I found Marcus 30 seconds later, coughing, terrified, very much alive, 20 feet from a boat he'd bought for a woman who had never once asked what actually cost him to keep her secret. We got them both out. Nobody died. I want that stated plainly, because this was never going to be a story where I let anyone drown just to make a point land harder. Sawyer was already on the dock when I came up the ladder with Marcus's arm slung over my shoulders, still in a suit with a courthouse visitor badge clipped to the lapel, like he'd run straight from a judge's chambers to the water's edge without stopping to think about how that would look. He didn't ask about the case or the injunction or any of the 10 days behind us. He just took Marcus's other side without being asked, got him down onto a stretcher, and then turned around and put a blanket over my shoulders like it was the only job in the world that mattered to him right then. Told you I'd get there. You're late, I teeth chattering. I'm exactly on time, he said, and for once I let him be right. On the dock, soaked and shaking, my father's radio, the one I still keep tuned to that channel every single night of my life, crackled with the Coast Guard confirming both patients stable. In my other ear, at nearly the same moment, the system's voice came back one final time, and it didn't sound quite as flat as it had all week. Disbursement complete, $0 remaining, condition satisfied. Then, after a pause no automated system should technically need, a message appended by the estate to be delivered upon full compliance. From Walter Kingsley, you didn't know my name that night in the Sound, I never forgot yours. Go be exactly as fast as you've always been. Not for the money. For the people still in the water. I sat down hard on the dock and let myself cry for the first time all week, because I was finally actually on the dock and not still in the current. The weeks after moved the way weeks always do once the worst of it is finally behind you, faster than the 10 days that came before them, and in daylight this time. The Coast Guard's incident report found First Light had failed 3 separate safety standards Anchor Point's old inspectors had signed off on without ever actually boarding the boat. That report, cross-referenced against the fabricated storm claim Sawyer and I finally located in full. Vivian's own signature, notarized, on a loss statement describing hull damage that photographs proved had never existed, went to the state insurance commissioner within the week. Vivian Hale was charged with insurance fraud 11 days after that. The society page that photographed her arriving at the marina in white photographed her a second time, considerably less flattering, leaving the county courthouse in gray. A reporter from the local news outside the fire station a few days into all of it, microphone already out, asking whether it was true that the same woman who'd pulled 2 people out of a burning yacht also happened to own the insurance company that failed to catch the hazard in the first place. "I'm not going to talk about the business side of it," I told her, still in my dive gear, still smelling like the harbor Vivian Hale had once promised me I'd never stop smelling like. "I can tell you a fire department showed up in under 6 minutes and got everyone out alive. That part I'll talk about all day." It ran on the 6 o'clock cast anyway, my name under a chyron calling me a local hero who owned the insurer at the center of a fraud probe, and I hated it for exactly 1 evening before I understood that hating it wouldn't undo it, and that the only thing left worth controlling was what happened next. Roland Marsh's fast, quiet exit from Anchor Point didn't shield him from what the sale itself uncovered. He's currently the subject of a state fraud investigation covering 9 other falsified claims we found once we knew exactly where to look. Marcus's family didn't come through it as cleanly as they'd hoped either. It came out gently, then completely, in the divorce filing that Whitfield Group operating funds had quietly covered marketing expenses that turned out to be First Light's last 2 maintenance bills, a detail that made its way into both the settlement and the local business paper in the same week. Constance Whitfield resigned from the Newport Preservation Society's board a month later, citing personal reasons that everyone at that club understood perfectly and nobody said aloud. Marcus and I settled the divorce without a fight. I think in the end, he understood there was nothing left worth fighting over that either of us still actually wanted. Sawyer's family found out about all of it roughly the way everyone else in Newport did from the papers, and instead of the reckoning he'd braced himself for, his uncle called and asked, quietly, whether he'd consider actually running Kingsley and Vane the way his grandfather always meant for someone to. He said yes. He asked me to be there when he told the board, which is its own kind of vow, if you know how to listen for one. We used what was left of the goodwill, since the money itself was long gone before any of this made the papers, to endo the dive team's equipment fund permanently, under both our fathers' names, the Callahan Kingsley Rescue Fund, new tanks, a faster boat. A standing grant that means the next kid who almost doesn't make it home from Block Island Sound has 40 fewer minutes to wait than my father did. Most nights now we eat standing up at my kitchen counter, nothing that requires a reservation. Nobody has once asked me to explain why I still keep a dive knife within reach out of habit. Sawyer noticed it the second week and didn't say a word about it. He just started leaving his coffee mug on the same side of the sink as mine, like that was an answer to a question I hadn't asked out loud yet. Some mornings now, Sawyer meets me at the dock before my shift starts. We don't say much, because 6 years of marriage taught me that the quiet ones are usually the only ones actually paying attention. Last week he watched the sun come up over the breakwater and said, without any particular weight on it, that it reminded him of the name of the boat that started all of this. First Light, he said, every single day if you're paying attention. I didn't need $3 million to prove I was worth something. I only needed 10 days to prove I already knew it. Did she go far enough, or was she still too merciful? Comment justice if the ending was perfect. Comment harder if you wanted an even colder revenge. Your comments decide how ruthless the next ending should be. Like and subscribe if you want to be here for the next story.